welcome. Hey, we are Marathon 85, and we are back for a weekly show, and we are discussing the 90s today. And with us is Tim. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thanks.
Good, good. John, how you doing?
Wonderful.
Excellent. So today we're talking about what we were listening to in the 90s, the entire decade, 1990 to 99. So why don't we start with Tim today? Tim, what were you listening to in the decade of the 90s?
Okay. Earlier, geez, what was around then? Of course, it was Nirvana. Of course, had come on the scene. The grunge scene had hit then, and like you say, had just completely wiped away hair metal, just like hadn't even been there. So
that decimated that.
It was, but geez, I was listening to Stone Temple Pilots, other bands like Alice in Chains, those particular ones. Of course, I was still listening to Rush as well, but the scene had changed, and bands were going back to a more stripped down sound. So I wasn't quite there yet, but I was intrigued, by the landscape had changed. So
oh yeah, big time.
Big time, yeah.
Anything specific in the mid or late 90s that you got into?
Yes, okay. I know Slash, he was doing some stuff, so I was listening to him after, of course, after Guns N' Roses and all of that had finally, petered out there, and he was getting some solo stuff going. So I was listening to him a little bit, but compared to the 80s, the 90s were less. It was less for me during the 90s.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of some other albums, goodness me, what else was there? Oh yes, of course, I Mother Earth was another one. Yeah. I really like them. Yes, that one, the album with One More Astronaut. I got that album. Yeah, I listened to that album a lot, actually, quite a bit. I like the rhythm and everything. I like their concept. I like the what they were doing. Some very wild stuff. So yeah.
Good stuff.
I don't know if that helps or anything, but yeah. That's about it. Yeah.
What were you listening to, John?
I started off with listening to Rush always. REM hit hard in the early 90s, and I REM and their sound and stuff like that. And that kind of morphed into a British band called Pulp. Really blew me away. I loved those guys. Common People. I just fell in love with Pulp. They were the two main ones that I was listening to. Listened to a lot of different things. I just joined in the early 90s Montgomery Trail Mix, and they were blues, rock, country.
Right.
And so they exposed me to a lot of other things which I was listening to, but nothing grabbed me like REM and Pulp, and of course always Rush. I heard Nirvana. Yeah, some of it was good. Was happy that hair metal died. I applauded. Hated that stuff. Hated it. So, but yeah.
Anything in the late 90s, John, that caught your ear?
Well, it's Big Wreck. Big
Wreck.
Pulp and Big Wreck. That's it started off with REM, morphed into Pulp and Big Wreck, I think.
Good.
Yeah, and yourself?
In the early 90s, as hair metal died, some people are very happy about that. I actually did get into Pearl Jam. I remember buying the CD, I should say, And actually, you brought up REM, and it took me a few years, but I remember getting the album that had Drive, and I just loved that song, Drive. As the mid 90s came along, Metallica released Load. I had that, and I think they did Reload. I had both of those. And as the later 90s, I kind of got an office job, and I kind of got exposed to things like Jewel and some more mellow stuff. There was also a band out of Toronto. What was her name? Amanda Marshall. She had a huge album, really big, and I think it was more mid late 90s. Really big song on the radio at the time. And we closed out with kind of getting back into some of that 80s metal. Some bands started reuniting, some albums came out. Iron Maiden reunited, Judas Priest reunited. But yeah, it was a different time, and I think a lot of it was based on age and the maturing even of myself and hitting that 30 range and getting up there, and you start to change your choices in music. And actually, one that I really got into was Harry Connick Jr. And I remember dragging my wife to the first show at CNE Grandstand in like 92, 93. And then I dragged her again down to the Hummingbird Center, it was called at the time. And we saw Harry Connick in 98. And that was, I loved the blues and I loved Harry. And so, yeah, I guess as I got a little older, I started to mellow out. But yeah, there was some fantastic music though. I mean, not all of it I liked, obviously. I didn't like everything, but I Mother Earth and I really enjoyed them. 3 Days Grace was another band emerging on the scene in the late 90s, early 2000s. So making a name to himself. Really enjoyed their stuff. And I did see Big Wreck too, by the way. They were fantastic live. But yeah, that was it for me. That was it. Those were the bands that certainly I was into in the 2000s.
Okay, cool.
Actually, you jogged my memory on a lot of those as well. I'd forgotten, like REM as well too, and I did listen to them. And they had more than one hit, but I did like their style. And the bass player too, I liked his style of playing bass. I did listen to that as well.
Right.
Very simple sound.
It was, but it was like Losing My Religion was such a huge song in the early mid 90s. That was massive, and Drive was good too. But we better wrap this up for another week here, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us, and we are Marathon 85.